Greetings and welcome back to Junior English and our study in the MyPerspectives volume Unit 2. I'm with you on page 146 and following as we look at the historical perspective of Unit 2. I just want to begin though with the essential question, what role does individualism play in American society? You're suggesting here, notice, read with me on 146. As you read these selections that we will study now, work with your whole class to explore the meaning of individualism from text to topic. For Walt Whitman, individualism formed the cornerstone of life in America. His writing celebrates the promise of America. We'll see it in his Song of Myself, in which all people can make an impact by developing their unique abilities. For Emily Dickinson, individualism meant looking inward to express the deepest musings of the soul. As you read, consider what the selections show about perceptions of individualism in American society in the 19th century. Also, consider how these works influence American attitudes towards individualism today. I'd like you to look at the learning strategies that are there provided for you on 146. On 147, there's the list of the different readings that we will work with. Go ahead and turn now to page 148. I want you to see that we're now working with the focus period of Unit 2, 1800 to 1870. Notice your timeline at the bottom of these pages and study that closely. Also notice that you do have some voices of the period. You have quotes by Davy Crockett and Clara Barton, as well as Henry David Thoreau. We'll be studying some Thoreau, obviously, in Unit 2. Let's now read and take some notes over this historical perspective period of 1800 to 1870. History of the period. Notice again your topics, your headings. What is an American? French writer Alex de Tocqueville came to America in the early 1830s with a colleague to study and write about American prisons. Instead, they ended up traveling extensively and studying American democracy. In his book, Democracy in America, de Tocqueville coined the word individualism as a way of describing the attitudes he found in America, where people are, quote, always considering themselves as standing alone, imagining that their whole destiny is in their own hands, end quote. Second paragraph, Jefferson's bargain. In 1803, President Thomas Jefferson purchased from France 800,000 square miles of North America for 15 million, about 3 cents per acre, and in the process, more than double the size of the United States. Jefferson sent explorers, Mather Lewis and William Clark, with their Corps of Discovery to investigate the land, people, and plants and animals of the new territory. They crossed the continent, reached the Pacific Ocean, and led the way for decades of westward bound settlers. The War of 1812. In the War of 1812, the United States once again defeated Great Britain, asserting its independence from European control. However, the most important effect of the war may have been the sense of solidarity it fostered within the young nation. The People's President. The 1828 election of Andrew Jackson, the People's President, ushered in the era of the common man, quote unquote. The center of power began to shift west, even as a two-party system was emerging. You'll, by the way, work with the map on page 149 and the integration of knowledge and ideas. From which countries did the United States acquire land during this era? How do you think these acquisitions influenced the way that Americans viewed themselves and their nation's future by the 1850s? Manifest destiny. Many Americans believed in manifest destiny, the idea that it was their right to settle America's lands across the continent. By 1840, about 40% of the U.S. population lived west of the Appalachian Mountains. By 1860, following the great pioneer migrations to Oregon, California, and Texas, only about half of the population lived in the eastern part of the United States. Westward expansion inspired an upsurge of national pride and self-awareness. Trail of Tears. The tragic policy of Indian removal, quote unquote, a result of westward expansion, resulted in the confiscation of tribal lands and the relocation of more than 100,000 Native Americans. On the 1838 Trail of Tears, for example, thousands of Cherokee perished on the trek from Georgia to Oklahoma, where the promise of freedom from white settlement would last for only about 15 years. Page 150. On the Move. Travel was transformed in the 19th century by new methods and routes of transportation. The National Road, begun in 1811, reached St. Louis and the Mississippi River by mid-century. In 1860, nearly 1,000 steamboats were plying the Mississippi, and some 30,000 miles of railroad track had been spread across the nation. The lure of the West motivated this revolution in transportation, which created a bond between existing and new states. Coming to America. In the first half of the 19th century, hundreds of thousands of immigrants, mostly European, were arriving on American shores. By the 1850s, the number was in the millions. Pushed from home by hardships and revolutions, these people were lured by a land of opportunity. The Industrial Revolution. A machine called the cotton gin, which separated cotton fibers from seeds, invented in 1793, revolutionized American industry. By 1860, more than 1,000 factories, mainly in New England, were turning more than 400 million pounds of southern cotton into cloth, which was then sold around the world. However, while factories boomed in the North, enlarging the job market for women and immigrants, slavery grew stronger in the South. A flood of new ideas. Buoyed by a sense of their power to improve society, Americans set out to reform what they saw as problems or failures. Voters demanded better schools, and public education slowly began to expand. Reform movements sprang up in religion, in temperance, and in women's rights. All brought important changes, but the most revolutionary movement was the drive to end slavery. Slavery and the Civil War. States in the North had declared slavery illegal by 1804 and had begun the gradual emancipation of enslaved African Americans within their borders. By 1860, however, slavery was more entrenched than ever in the South. Out of a population of 31.5 million, there were 4 million enslaved African Americans and about 500,000 free blacks. In 6 states in the Deep South, the slave population accounted for approximately half of the total population. Abolitionists, people who worked to end slavery, were black and white, northern and sometimes southern. They organized, preached, spoke, published newspapers, and wrote books. They also helped fugitives flee slavery via a network of secret escape routes into the North and into Canada known as the Underground Railroad. As their actions intensified, they helped push the nation to the breaking point, the eruption of the Civil War. The war lasted for 4 years and remains today the deadliest conflict in American history. Individualism in the Reconstruction era. America emerged from the Civil War with many questions unresolved. Chief among these was how to guarantee the rights of millions whom law and tradition had previously treated as property rather than as people. The Reconstruction era that followed the war was a tumultuous period in which former slaves capitalized on their newfound freedoms, including sending a record number of African Americans into government. The period did not last long, however, as a backlash ensued that included widespread violence. Freedoms for African Americans were rolled back, and the rights of individuals were quashed as the gains of Reconstruction evaporated, and the Jim Crow system became firmly established throughout the South. On page 151, I want you to take a look at the literature selections that are provided for you and the connections as well across time. We now turn to the readings of Unit 2. Thank you.